Money doesn't buy happiness, they say. In my family, it bought something far rarer: the truth. My name is Samantha Reed, and this is the story of how my grandfather used $100,000 to expose who we really were. Except, here's the twist: he never gave us the money at all. It was Christmas Eve, and the Reed mansion blazed with chandeliers and candles, every reflection rehearsed for the annual performance we called Family. At the head of the mahogany table sat Walter Reed, 88, founder of Reed Construction, hands resting on 3 white envelopes that glowed like bait. To his right, my father Charles, polished and vain, a man who measured worth by suits and profits. Beside him, my mother Denise, 52, radiant and terrified, a woman built entirely from fear of losing her status. And then there was me, Samantha, 30, the disappointment, architect instead of executive, independent instead of obedient. My best friend Zoe Harper, lawyer and witness to every family charade, stood near the door clutching a leather folder. She knew what was coming. Walter cleared his throat. I've been thinking about legacy, about what we leave behind if those who inherit it don't understand what it cost. Charles smiled indulgently. Dad, you'll outlive us all. Walter ignored him. I've prepared 3 gifts. Inside each envelope is a check, a taste of what's to come. The air shifted. My father leaned forward. My mother's jewels trembled in the candlelight. Even I felt my pulse quicken. Zoe caught my eye and gave a tiny shake of her head. A silent warning. Walter slid the first envelope to Charles. For the son who built on what I started. Then one to Denise. For the woman who stood beside him. The third remained before him. He looked at me with a strange, quiet hope. For the granddaughter who asks the right questions. I accepted it. Thank you, Grandpa. Will you? He asked softly. Before I could answer, Charles tore open his envelope. Dad, this is incredible. My mother gasped. $100,000! You haven't said thank you, Walter said. They both stumbled through perfunctory gratitude, too late. Their eyes already gleamed with calculation. I kept my envelope sealed. Thank you for thinking of me, I said. Walter's expression softened. The first genuine thank you tonight. Dinner was agony. My parents whispered about investments, about what this meant for their inheritance. Walter watched silently, disappointment etched deep. Later, Zoe pulled me aside. Don't cash that check. Why not? Because the account's closed. He shut it down 6 hours before writing them. It's a test. I froze. A test? He wanted to see who thanked him for the money, and who thanked him for the gesture. Across the room, Walter sat alone by the fire, the flicker carving lines of loneliness across his face. I joined him. After a long silence, he said, You didn't open it. No? Why not? Because the gift isn't the envelope. His eyes glistened. Do you know the hardest part of building something? No. Realizing those you built it for would sell it the moment you're gone. They see only dollar signs. He smiled sadly. This is about values, Samantha. Character. Gratitude. That's real legacy. That night, I couldn't stop thinking about the envelope in my purse. The next morning, instead of cashing it, I wrote across it. I owe nothing, but I'm grateful for everything. Then I slipped it through his mail slot. I didn't know it yet, but that act would unravel my family. 2 days later, curiosity got the best of me. I stood in line at my bank, envelope in hand. Maybe Zoe was wrong. Maybe this was all symbolic. The teller scanned it, frowned. I'm sorry, ma'am. This account was closed 6 hours before this check was written. I thanked her and walked out, numb. The check, worthless paper, suddenly felt heavier than gold. And then I understood. It wasn't about money, it was about reaction. What would we reveal when faced with nothing? I called Zoe. You tried to cash it, didn't you? She asked. Yes. Well, your parents did too. They're losing it. Accusing your grandfather of senility, talking about lawyers and competency hearings. Of course they were. To them, it wasn't a gift. It was a betrayal. What should I do? I asked. Follow your gut. I looked at the signature on the check, steady and deliberate. I'm going to write him a real thank you. Not for the money, for the lesson. Zoe smiled through the phone. You're the only one who'll pass. That evening, I sat at my small kitchen table and wrote the most honest letter of my life. I thanked him for reminding me that real wealth is gratitude, not currency. That the best gifts can't be deposited. I sealed it, drove to his estate, and handed it to Maria, the longtime housekeeper. He's been waiting for you, she said gently. You're the only one who came back to say thank you. Was he angry? I asked. Not angry, just sad. He told me once that money is a tool, not a trophy. But your family forgot the difference. Driving home, my phone rang. Mom. Do you realize what your grandfather's done? She snapped. He gave us worthless checks. They weren't about the money. What did you just say? It was a test, to see who'd value the gesture. That's insane. No, it's brilliant. When you thought you had money, you planned how to spend it. You never once said thank you. How dare you? You taught me to perform gratitude, Mom. He taught me to feel it. I hung up, heart pounding. For the first time, I'd spoken the truth. That night, I lay awake thinking of my grandfather. The man who'd built an empire only to realize he'd raised heirs who saw him as an ATM. The man who loved us enough to shatter the illusion. Around midnight, my phone buzzed. A text from an unknown number. Thank you for the letter. You're the only one who understood. WR. He'd never texted before. Maria must have helped him. But it didn't matter. The message was clear. I'd passed. What I didn't know was that this was only the first test. And the truth my grandfather was about to reveal would tear the Reed family apart. The performance was over. And the reckoning had begun. The week after Christmas was the longest of my life. My phone wouldn't stop ringing. My father's voicemails swung between rage and wounded pride. My mother's texts alternated between guilt and threats. Even cousins who'd ignored me for years suddenly checked in about Grandpa Walter's estate. I stayed silent because I'd begun to realize the test wasn't about the checks at all. It was about what came next. Who would reveal greed? Who would stay composed? Who would let their mask slip? 3 days after New Year's, my father appeared at my apartment unannounced, immaculate suit and simmering fury intact. We need to talk, he said, pushing past me. He scanned my modest furniture with disdain. To him, my independence was proof of failure. Do you have any idea what you've done? He demanded. I wrote Grandpa a thank you letter. That's all? His voice cracked. He gave us fake checks, Samantha, worthless paper. And instead of worrying about his sanity, you're encouraging his delusions. They weren't delusions. They were intentional. No sane man plays games with $100,000, he snapped. Your grandfather's slipping. We need to act before he ruins everything he built. I sank onto the couch. You're just angry the money wasn't real. Of course I'm angry. I've given my life to Reed Construction. I've earned that money. You've earned a salary, I said, and a comfortable one. He glared at me, chest heaving. It's about respect, Samantha. I've run that company for 20 years. I deserve to inherit it. Not as a gift, as payment for service rendered. And there it was. He didn't see inheritance as legacy. He saw it as compensation. Did you ever thank him? I asked. For giving you that opportunity? I thanked him by growing his empire. That's not gratitude, Dad. That's transaction. His face turned scarlet. You have no idea what it's like to live in someone's shadow. Everyone still calls it Walter Reed's company. For the first time, I saw the truth behind his rage. Not ambition, but jealousy. "I'm sorry," I said softly. "I didn't realize how much that hurt." He scoffed. "You walked away from the family business. You live in this shoebox. You could have had everything, if you'd just stand with me." "What does that mean?" "Your grandfather's called a family meeting tomorrow. He's bringing Zoe as counsel. We're confronting him about his competency. If you side with him, you're out. Of the company, the will, everything." I looked at him, really looked, and saw a frightened man mistaking power for love. "I'll do what's right," I said, "not what's profitable." "Then you're a fool," he said, storming out. "Are you with family or against us?" "I'm with integrity," I said quietly. "If that makes me against you, so be it." He slammed the door and silence filled the room. The next morning, I drove to my grandfather's estate early. The house looked softer in daylight, less cathedral, more memory. Maria let me in. "He's expecting you." I found Walter in his study, papers neatly arrayed. His eyes were sharp, not senile. "You knew I'd come early," I said. "You always were early," he smiled. "Your father called it punctuality. I call it respect." "Dad visited me yesterday," I said. "He wants me to declare you incompetent." Walter nodded, unsurprised. "And what did you tell him?" "That I choose integrity over profit." He studied me, pride flickering behind the sadness. "That choice never pays well, but it's the only one worth making." He opened a leather notebook. "Do you know what this is?" I shook my head. "My journal. A record of every family conversation about money this past year." He turned it toward me. Pages of tidy handwriting coded by color. Yellow for will questions, blue for money, red for unprompted thanks, green for genuine interest in me as a person. The pages were a sea of yellow and blue. Only a few red marks, almost no green. "Just you and Maria," he said quietly. "You're the only ones who asked how I was feeling, not how much I was worth." My throat tightened. "I'm sorry." "Don't be. Just understand. People forget how to see beyond money. They start measuring love in dollars." "Is that why you did the test?" "Partly, but mostly to see if anyone remembered what Reed Construction was built on. Not concrete, gratitude. My father started this company in 1952 with a loan he could barely repay. Every night he wrote 3 things he was grateful for. When he died, I found 40 years of journals. He opened one, yellowed and worn. May 3rd, 1968. "Grateful for my son Charles learning to hold a hammer. Mrs. Chen's soup. Winning the Henderson bid." He understood success was built on small kindnesses. "When did we stop being grateful?" I asked. "When we started feeling entitled," he said simply. "The checks were a mirror, to see who could still say thank you when the money vanished." "What happens now?" "Now comes the meeting," he said. "The rest of the test." 30 minutes later, the family crowded into the study. My parents rigid on the sofa, Uncle Robert pale by the window, Aunt Caroline clutching her designer purse, and Zoe standing near the door with a folder of legal papers. Walter looked at each of us in silence until my father finally snapped. "Dad, we're worried. These stunts with fake checks. We think you need help." "Help?" Walter repeated. "Is that what you call filing a petition to declare me incompetent?" My mother's face drained of color. "Walter?" "Zoe, read it." Zoe unfolded a document, petition for guardianship, filed by Charles and Denise Reed, requesting control over Walter Reed's person and estate. I turned to my parents in disbelief. "You tried to take his assets?" "Someone had to protect him," my father shouted. "Protect me," Walter said softly, "or protect your entitlement." He nodded to Zoe again. She read from another file, Over the last decade, Charles Reed received $12 million in salary, stock, and perks. 3 major losses, each covered personally by Walter Reed. My father sputtered. That's out of context. You wanted to expand into commercial real estate in 2019, Walter said. I warned you. When it failed, who paid the $4 million loss? You wanted to cut employee benefits? I told you no. You did it anyway, and I settled the lawsuits. You've been compensated for everything except humility. My father's voice cracked. After all I've done? After all I've forgiven, Walter corrected. The checks were to see who could appreciate a gift without price. You failed. Samantha didn't. All eyes turned to me. The petition, Walter continued, was your second test. Would you care for me or seize control? You failed again. My mother's tone turned brittle. So this is punishment. This is clarity, Walter said. My legacy isn't money, it's character, and I won't leave it to people who treat it like a vault. He placed a document on the desk. My new will, filed and witnessed. My father lunged forward. Let me see. You'll receive a copy, but the summary is simple. Reed Construction will go to the one person who showed genuine gratitude. He looked directly at me. Samantha Reed will inherit controlling interest in the company. Charles remains CEO, but she holds the deciding vote. The room erupted. My father shouted. My mother sobbed. Robert sat stunned. Caroline's eyes darted, already recalculating alliances. I don't want it, I whispered. Silence fell. What? My father spat. I don't want the company or the money. I just wanted my grandfather to be respected. I looked at Walter. If you give it to me, they'll hate us both. Walter smiled gently. That's exactly why you deserve it. You're the only one who doesn't want to win. And I understood. The inheritance had never been about wealth. It was about wisdom. After the chaos, only Zoe, Maria, and I remained. I really don't want to run a corporation, I said. I know, Walter replied. But you will, because you're the only one I trust to protect it instead of exploit it. What if I fail? Then you'll fail doing the right thing. That's a legacy I can live with. Driving home, my phone buzzed with messages, anger, threats, demands. I turned it off and let the silence settle. The fake checks had revealed greed. The new will had redrawn the battlefield. And I, unwilling heir, now stood at its center. Gratitude, I realized, isn't about what you get. It's about what you refuse to lose. Your integrity. Grandpa's final test wasn't about money. It was about proving that the only way to win was not to play. The week after the family meeting was open war. My father didn't grieve his lost inheritance. He weaponized his title instead. First, he called an emergency board meeting without informing me or my grandfather. The agenda: concerns about the founder's competency and stability during transition. Translation: a coup. Second, he leaked a story to the business press painting Grandpa as senile and me as the manipulative granddaughter who'd stolen his legacy. The next morning, my face stared back from the paper. Reed Construction dynasty in turmoil. Third, he spread rumors of mass layoffs. Within 2 days, 3 top managers resigned. Panic spread like fire. I sat in my small architecture office watching decades of work unravel. I was 30, inexperienced, powerless. My father had allies. I had a moral high ground and a title I didn't even officially own. The phone rang. Zoe. Have you seen the morning news? Yes. Character assassination. It's worse. His lawyers claiming undue influence. They're contesting the will. My stomach dropped. Can they do that? They can't win, but they can drag it out for years, bleed the company dry in the process. So what do? We fight back, Zoe said. Meet me at your grandfather's. He's ready. Grandpa's library looked like a war room, shelves stripped, documents piled high. Maria sorted papers with quiet efficiency. Walter looked tired but resolute. "I expected Charles to attack," he said, predictable as always. "He's destroying the company out of spite." "I know, which is why it's time for the rest of the test." He gestured to rows of ledgers and journals. 30 years of truth. Zoe opened one, brows furrowing. "Walter, this is damning." I leaned over. Meeting notes, expense records, personal observations. "This entry," Zoe said, "documents your father authorizing kickbacks in 2015 to speed permits for the Riverside project." I went cold. "That's illegal." "Very. And it gets worse. Bid rigging, buried safety complaints. He's covered it all." I turned to Walter. "You knew?" "I knew," he said heavily, "and I cleaned up every mess. I told myself he'd grow out of it. I was wrong." "Why show us now?" "Because he's painting me as incompetent and you as manipulative. I have 3 decades of evidence showing the opposite." Maria slid another box toward me. "Letters from board members and partners. People your father thought were loyal." I read one from Thomas Chen, a senior board member. "Charles's leadership is damaging morale. Cutting benefits to boost quarterly numbers has driven good people away. Reed Construction can't survive another decade of this." "How many letters?" 37, Maria said. "All written to Walter. All pleading for change." Walter nodded. "That's when I realized the empire would collapse the moment I was gone. I had to act." Zoe looked up from a ledger. "Walter, if this goes public, Charles won't just lose the company. He could face prison." "I know. So your plan is mutual destruction?" "No," he said, turning to the window. "It's choice. He can accept the will as written and stay as CEO under Samantha's oversight, privately. Or he can fight, and every file here goes to the authorities." The room fell silent. It wasn't just a family dispute anymore. It was a moral reckoning. "He'll never accept," I whispered. "His pride won't allow it." "Then pride will be his downfall," Walter said simply. Maria handed me an envelope. "He wrote this for you months ago." It was a letter in my grandfather's steady script. "My dearest Samantha, if you're reading this, the test has gone further than I hoped. It means Charles chose pride over wisdom. I made mistakes raising him. I rewarded success without teaching gratitude. You're the only one who ever said thank you without calculating the cost. That's not superiority. It's understanding that everything is a gift, and gratitude is the only proper response to grace." When I looked up, Walter's eyes were wet. "I wrote that the night before Christmas Eve," he said. "I knew it would come to this." "So it wasn't a test," I said quietly. "It was a trap." He shook his head. "No, a chance. He could have chosen gratitude. He didn't." Zoe straightened. "Then we give him a choice now. Accept the will, or we expose everything." Walter nodded. "Document it. Send it to his lawyer. He has 72 hours." The letter Zoe drafted was cold, surgical, final. "Accept the will and remain CEO under oversight. All evidence remains sealed. Continue the challenge and the full record will be turned over to the board, the press, and law enforcement." It ended. "Your client has 72 hours to decide whether he wants to be remembered as Walter Reed's son or the man who destroyed his legacy." We sent it that night. 18 hours later, my father called a meeting. Neutral ground, a conference room at Zoe's firm. He was already there when I arrived. Same tailored suit, but the arrogance was gone. He looked older, deflated. "Where's your lawyer?" I asked. "I don't need one," he said softly. "Sit." Zoe stayed near the door, silent witness. He stared at his hands. I read the files. Every cover-up, every bribe, every compromise I justified as business. I told myself I was protecting the company. He looked up at me. I was protecting my ego. Dad? Let me finish. His voice cracked. Your grandfather gave me everything. I turned it into a mirror for my vanity. I saw employees as numbers. I saw my father as competition. I built profit, but lost the purpose. He lifted the letter Zoe had sent. This gives me a choice. Accept the will or go down fighting. But it's not a choice. It's a reckoning. What will you do? I'll accept. Not because I fear exposure, but because I finally understand what he was teaching me. He reached into his briefcase and set down an envelope. My resignation. Effective end of fiscal year. I'll stay through transition, then step aside. You don't have to resign, I said. The will lets you stay. Under your oversight, he said with a faint smile. My pride isn't built for that. The company needs someone who sees people, not problems. I don't want to run it. I know. That's why you should. The best leaders are the reluctant ones. He stood, hesitated at the door. I'm sorry, Samantha. For everything. You're going to give this family what I never could. Gratitude. Then he was gone. Zoe sat beside me. I didn't expect that. Neither did I. You think he means it? I don't know, but maybe that's enough. That night, I told Walter. Charles resigned, I said. He nodded. He called. Said he finally understood. Do you believe him? Walter smiled faintly. I want to. Because despite everything, he's still my son. The company's a mess, I said. Low morale, trust shattered. Then rebuild it, he said. Start with gratitude. Start with people. I'm scared. Good. Fear keeps you humble. Humility keeps you grateful. Gratitude keeps you human. He reached for a worn envelope. The final piece of the test. He handed it to me. From my father. The day he gave me the company. He told me to read it whenever I forgot why we do what we do. Inside was a single page, fragile with age. My dear son, if you're reading this, it means you've forgotten something important. We didn't build this company to make money. We built it to make a difference. Every project houses families, creates jobs, serves communities. The money is only a tool. Stay grateful for the chance to serve. Stay humble about your role in something larger. The true measure of success isn't what you earn, but what you give. Tears blurred the ink. He knew, I whispered. He knew this would be our struggle. He knew because he fought it too, Walter said. And now that letter is yours. I held it carefully. Thank you. He smiled. No, Samantha. Thank you for remembering what the rest of us forgot. Driving home, I thought about everything the past month had exposed: greed, pride, and the quiet courage of gratitude. My grandfather hadn't just tested us, he'd redeemed us. The checks had been canceled long ago, but the lessons they carried, humility, gratitude, integrity, would outlast every dollar. And for the first time, I understood what true inheritance meant. Not wealth, not control, but the ability to say thank you and mean it. 3 months after my father's resignation, Reed Construction was still standing. Barely. Employees were leaving, clients stalling, and the press treated us like a morality play about greed and family. Every morning, I walked into the office under the weight of a question: was I the savior or the final nail in the coffin? My first day as interim CEO, I found a note on my desk. Some people inherit businesses, others destroy them. Which will you be? Zoe sipped her coffee in my father's old office. Welcome to leadership. Half the people want you to fail so they can say they were right. The rest are waiting to see if you're worth following. Inspiring. She slid over a folder. Charles didn't just cheat ethically, he cooked the books. Profits were inflated. A pension fund's in deficit. You've inherited a financial time bomb. I groaned. Why didn't Grandpa warn me? Zoe hesitated. Because he's in the hospital. Minor strokes. Presbyterian. He didn't want you to find out alone. The world blurred. I was already moving before she finished. At the hospital, Walter looked smaller than ever, wires trailing from his hands. Maria sat quietly in the corner. There's my architect, he whispered. Why didn't you tell me? Because you'd stop fighting for the company. It needs you more than I do. That's not fair. Life's not fair, sweetheart. How's the war? Bleeding out. Staff's leaving. Someone left a note telling me I'll ruin everything. He smiled faintly. Good. Means they're afraid you might succeed. Optimism doesn't suit you. I'm dying. I'm allowed optimism. He gestured weakly for Maria to step out, then reached under his pillow for an envelope. I've carried this 30 years. Time you saw it. Inside was a faded photograph. 2 young men grinning before a construction site. One was Walter, the other, unknown. Who's that? James Chen, my original partner. We founded Reed Construction in 1962. I've never heard of him. You wouldn't. I erased him. 10 years in, he caught me cooking the books. The same sins I condemned your father for. The words hit like a blow. What happened? He confronted me, said we should come clean. I refused. Said the shortcuts were necessary. He threatened to go public, so I bought him out. Made him sign an NDA. Erased him from our story. Why tell me now? Because I'm not a saint, Samantha. I'm a man who built success on rot and spent decades trying to bury the smell. You need to know the truth if you're going to rebuild. Who else knows? Maria. And James's daughter, May. That's why Thomas Chen's been loyal. He's James's nephew. I stared at the photo. So this whole test, was it really about gratitude or guilt? Both. I wanted to see if anyone in this family would do what James tried to do for me, save the company from itself. He paused, breathing shallowly. There's one more clause in my will. 20% of Reed Construction goes to May. Her father deserves to be written back into history. Does she know? Not yet. That's your job. The final test isn't whether you're grateful, but whether you'll inherit all the truth and still choose to do better. In the hallway, Thomas Chen waited. He told you? I nodded. My uncle never recovered, Thomas said quietly. He used to say you can't build anything lasting on a rotten foundation. Integrity isn't about never failing, it's about facing failure. Did he hate Walter? No, he loved him. That's what made it tragic. He met my eyes. Now you face the same choice. Keep the lie or expose the rot. One protects the name, the other rebuilds something real. Choose wisely. That night, surrounded by boxes of journals and confessions, I felt the weight of every sin that built this empire. Bribes, accidents, buried reports. Maria brought tea. He wanted you to have all of it, she said. He said you'd know what to do. I don't. You do. You're just afraid. She was right. The only way forward was through honesty. I called Zoe. I need a statement, I said. A full disclosure. Every violation. Every fraud. She went silent. That'll destroy the company. Maybe implicate you. I know. Your grandfather will hate you for it. I know. Then why? Because someone has to tell the truth. Before releasing anything, I met Mei Chen at a cafe downtown. Silver hair, calm eyes, the grace of someone who'd already forgiven more than most. I handed her the photograph. Your father, and my grandfather. She studied it for a long time. Mom couldn't bear to look at this after Dad died. I told her everything. The fraud, the erasure, the inheritance. I don't want his money, she said immediately. I understand. But I need you to know what I'm planning. A full public disclosure. She raised an eyebrow. You're going to blow up the company? It's the only honest thing to do. She sighed. My father spent decades angry. Before he died, he told me I should have forgiven him, not because he deserved it, but because I deserved peace. I don't follow. You're calling this integrity, but are you sure it's not pride? The pride of being the one who burns it all down to prove she's righteous? The words cut deep. So I should keep lying? No, but there's a difference between truth-telling and truth-dumping. She showed me a photo of her nonprofit's housing project. We're over budget, behind schedule, but doing it right. That's what redemption looks like. Not erasing the past, rebuilding better on top of it. What are you suggesting? Face the truth, make restitution, but don't destroy 3,000 jobs to make a moral point. Wisdom matters as much as honesty. Her gaze softened. Sometimes the bravest thing isn't tearing down the house, it's repairing it brick by brick. That night, I sat beside my grandfather's hospital bed. He opened his eyes when I took his hand. I met May, I said. She told me truth without wisdom is destruction. He smiled faintly. She sounds like her father. I'm not going to burn the company down. I'll acknowledge the past, compensate those harmed, rebuild the culture. And I'm renaming the headquarters, Reed and Chen. Tears filled his eyes. Thank you. I'm not doing it for you. I know. That's why it matters. 2 weeks later, I faced the board. Reed Construction was built on mistakes, I began. We can pretend otherwise or make it right. My proposal: public acknowledgement of past violations, a restitution fund for injured workers, new ethics oversight, transparent audits. The room split. Half saw ruin, half saw renewal. Thomas Chen cast the deciding vote. My uncle believed rotten foundations can't hold. Samantha's offering us a rebuild. I vote yes. The motion passed. Slowly, painfully, the company began to heal. My grandfather died 3 months later, spring sunlight streaming through the hospital blinds. His last words were simple: "Thank you for being better than I was." At the funeral, my father appeared. Thinner, older, but lighter. "I'm sorry," he said, "for everything. I'm teaching business ethics now. Turns out I have plenty of cautionary tales." "The pay's bad?" I asked. He smiled. "But I sleep well." After the service, Maria handed me one last envelope. "He said to give you this today." Inside, in his shaky handwriting, "Thank you for not interrupting." Maria explained softly. "He tested everyone's gratitude with checks, but yours was different. He wanted to see if you could let him finish his story without trying to control it. Listening, that was your test." That night, in the quiet of my study, his study once, I opened a blank journal and wrote, "Gratitude Journal. Year 1. Today I buried my grandfather. I'm grateful he trusted me with the truth, even the ugly parts, and I finally understood. Inheritance isn't about wealth or power. It's about deciding what to carry forward and what to finally put down. The true gift wasn't money. It was the mirror, and the courage to look into it without flinching. 6 months after Walter's death, Reed Construction was unrecognizable. Not in the ways that business analysts measure. Our quarterly earnings were still struggling, our stock price hadn't recovered, and we'd lost 2 major clients who didn't want to be associated with a company publicly acknowledging past ethical violations. But in the ways that actually mattered, we were transforming. The old toxic culture was dying, slowly and painfully. The people who'd thrived under my father's leadership, the ones who saw ethics as obstacles and workers as expenses, they left on their own or were pushed out. It hurt every time. Some of them had been with the company for decades, but they couldn't or wouldn't adapt to a culture that valued integrity over quarterly profits. In their place, we brought in new people, younger mostly, but not always. People who wanted to build things that mattered, not just bank accounts. Project managers who cared about worker safety. Architects who prioritized sustainability. Accountants who actually said no when asked to be creative with the numbers. I'd moved into my grandfather's office, though I'd changed almost everything about it. The massive mahogany desk was gone, replaced with a simple standing desk made from reclaimed wood. The walls that had been covered in awards and certificates now displayed photos of our projects, not the glamorous ones, but the ones that served communities. Affordable housing, community centers, schools in underfunded districts. And on the wall behind my desk, a photograph of two young men at a construction site grinning at the camera. Below it, a plaque, James Chen and Walter Reed, co-founders, Reed Construction, 1962. It was a Friday afternoon, and I was preparing for Monday's board meeting where we'd present our first annual ethics report. The document was brutally honest. It detailed past violations, current remediation efforts, and the financial cost of doing things right. It wasn't going to make shareholders happy, but it would make us accountable. Maria knocked on my open door. "Miss Samantha? There's someone here to see you. She doesn't have an appointment, but she says it's important." "Who is it?" "Claire Warren. She says she's James Chen's widow." I looked up, surprised. I thought she'd passed away years ago. So did I. But she's here, and she's insisting on speaking with you personally. Claire Warren was 82 years old, tiny and fragile-looking, but her eyes were sharp and assessing. She walked into my office using a cane, waved off my offer of help, and sat in the chair across from my desk with the authority of someone who'd spent her life being underestimated. "Mrs. Warren," I said. I'm honored to meet you. Your husband was—" "My husband was a fool," she interrupted. "A principled, honest, stubborn fool who got himself erased from history because he wouldn't compromise his values. And I've spent 40 years being angry about it." I didn't know what to say to that. She pulled a worn envelope from her purse. "This is from James. He wrote it the night before the forced buyout. He was going to give it to Walter, but lost his nerve. After James died, I found it in his papers. I've been carrying it around for 20 years, trying to decide what to do with it." She handed me the envelope. It was sealed, yellowed with age. "Why give it to me now?" "Because May told me what you're doing. The restitution fund, the ethics reform, putting James's name back on the company. You're trying to fix what Walter broke." Her voice softened. "And because I'm dying. Cancer. Maybe 6 months. And before I go, I need to know if this letter still matters." "Do you want me to read it now?" "Please." I carefully opened the envelope and pulled out 2 sheets of paper covered in neat handwriting. "Dear Walter," it began. "By the time you read this, I'll have left Reed Construction. Not because I don't believe in what we built, but because I can't watch you destroy it. What started as our dream, building quality housing for working families, has become something else. A vehicle for profit at any cost. A monument to ambition without ethics. You'll tell yourself the shortcuts are necessary, that everyone does it, that we'll make it right once we're stable. But that day never comes, Walter. The shortcuts become habits. The compromises become character. And one day you'll wake up and realize you've become the kind of man we used to despise. I'm writing this because I love you. Because you're my brother in every way that matters. And because I know that somewhere inside you, beneath the ambition and the fear and the justifications, there's still the man I started this company with. The man who believed that work could be noble, that success could be ethical, that making money and making a difference weren't mutually exclusive. So this is my gift to you and my final appeal. When you read this, and I hope you do, years from now when you're ready to hear it, remember who you wanted to be. Remember why we started this. Remember that the best legacy isn't what you accumulate, but what you inspire others to become. I'm leaving you the company, not because you deserve it, but because somewhere deep down I still believe you can redeem it, that you can take the shortcuts we took and somehow make them mean something, that you can transform guilt into grace. But if you can't, if you spend the rest of your career justifying instead of rectifying, then I want you to know something. I forgive you anyway. Not because you've earned forgiveness, but because I choose to believe that people are more than their worst decisions. That redemption is always possible, even when it seems impossible. With love and disappointment and hope, your partner and friend, James. I read it twice, tears blurring the words the second time through. When I finally looked up, Claire was watching me with an expression I couldn't quite read. Did Walter ever see this? I asked. No. Like I said, James lost his nerve, kept it in his desk drawer. After the forced buyout, he couldn't bring himself to send it. Said it would just be salt in the wound. Why are you giving it to me? Because I want to know if James was right. Was redemption possible? Did Walter spend his life trying to make it right? Or did he just get better at hiding his sins? I thought about my grandfather's journals, the documentation, the test. The final months spent trying to salvage not just his company, but his soul. He tried, I said finally. He didn't succeed. Not completely. But he tried. And in the end, he passed on the chance to do better to someone who might actually pull it off. You. Me? Whether I want it or not. Claire studied me for a long moment. James used to say that the worst punishment for doing wrong isn't getting caught. It's living with yourself afterwards. Is that what happened to Walter? Did he suffer? Yes. Every day. He loved your husband. And he spent 40 years living with the fact that he'd destroyed that love for money. Something in Claire's face shifted. Good. I needed to know he suffered. Does that make me a terrible person? It makes you human. She stood up slowly, using her cane for support. May says you're planning to establish an ethics institute named after James. If your family approves, I'd like it to train construction managers in ethical practices, to make sure what happened with Walter and your husband never happens again. James would have liked that. The fool. But she was smiling now, tears in her eyes. He'd have said it was naive and idealistic and probably doomed to fail, and then he'd have thrown himself into making it work anyway. At the door, she turned back. There's something else. Something I never told May or anyone. The night before the forced buyout, James and Walter had dinner. Just the two of them. And when James came home, he told me something Walter had said. If I do this, if I force you out, I'll spend the rest of my life trying to make it right. And I'll probably fail, but I'll try. And James said, then you'll have wasted 2 lives. Yours trying to atone, and mine trying to forget. Did James ever forget? No. But in his last years he forgave. Not because Walter deserved it, but because carrying hate is exhausting, and James was tired. She met my eyes. Your grandfather spent his life trying to atone, but the person who really needed forgiveness was himself. And I don't think he ever gave it. After she left, I sat for a long time holding James's letter. Then I called an emergency meeting of the board's ethics committee. Thomas Chen, May, and 3 other board members gathered in the conference room. I read them James's letter. When I finished, the room was silent. I want to do something with this, I said. Something that honors both James's hope and Walter's attempt at redemption. But I'm not sure what. May spoke first. My father believed in second chances, even when it cost him everything. Maybe especially then. So I think we use this letter as the foundation for the Ethics Institute. Not hidden away, but published. Let people see the cost of compromise, the weight of guilt, the possibility of redemption. It will hurt Walter's reputation, Thomas warned. Make him look even worse than we've already acknowledged. Good, I said. Because the point isn't to protect his image, it's to tell the truth. And the truth is that Walter Reed was brilliant and flawed and greedy and generous and guilty and trying. All of it, all at once. And maybe that complexity is actually more valuable than a simple morality tale. The committee voted unanimously to publish the letter as part of the Institute's founding documents. Within a week, every major business publication had run stories about it. Some praised our transparency, others called it corporate self-flagellation. A few suggested I was destroying my grandfather's legacy out of some Freudian need to kill my father figure. I didn't care. Because something was happening that I hadn't anticipated. We started getting letters, hundreds of them, from workers who'd been injured on our job sites, from families who'd been displaced by our projects, from competitors who'd lost contracts because we'd bribed officials, all thanking us for finally acknowledging what had happened to them. One letter stood out. It was from a man named Carlos Martinez, now 70 years old. In 1975, I was working on the Riverside project. Your grandfather cut corners on safety equipment to save money. I fell from scaffolding and broke my back. Lost my career. Spent 10 years in chronic pain. Your family's insurance fought my claim. I got nothing. For 40 years, I've carried rage at Walter Reed. But reading James Chen's letter, understanding that Walter knew he was wrong and spent his life drowning in guilt, I find I don't want to carry that rage anymore. It's too heavy. So this is me, choosing to put it down. Not because your family deserves forgiveness, but because I deserve peace. I called Carlos immediately. We talked for 2 hours. By the end, we'd agreed on a restitution payment. Not enough to undo what had happened, but enough to acknowledge it. And we'd agreed that he'd speak at the Ethics Institute's opening, telling his story so future project managers would understand that shortcuts have faces. The grand opening of the James Chen Ethics Institute was held on what would have been James's 92nd birthday. We'd converted an old Reed construction building into a training center and museum. One wing documented the company's failures. The other showcased our attempts at redemption. And in the center, a library containing every ethics complaint, every violation, every compromise documented over 60 years. Claire Warren was too sick to attend, but she sent a video message that we played during the ceremony. My husband believed that integrity was the foundation everything else was built on, she said, her voice weak but clear. Your grandfather forgot that, and it cost him everything that mattered. Don't make the same mistake. Build on truth, even when lies are easier, because the shortcuts always catch up with you. Always. After the ceremony, I found Maria standing alone in the museum section, looking at a photograph of the original Reed construction crew from 1962. Young men in work clothes, grinning at the camera, full of dreams. He would have been proud of you, she said. Walter or James? Both. But I was thinking of your father. I looked at her, surprised. My father? He called me last week, asked if he could have a copy of Walter's gratitude journals, said he wanted to start his own, that it was time to stop measuring his life in dollars and start measuring it in lessons learned. Is he really changing, or is this just another performance? Does it matter? Change is change, even if it starts as performance. Sometimes you have to act like the person you want to be before you actually become them. That night, I returned to my office. On my desk was a simple white envelope, no name, no return address, just sitting there, like it had appeared out of nowhere. Inside was a single sheet of paper with a single sentence. The fourth envelope was always for you. I turned it over. On the back, in my grandfather's handwriting. You passed. Not because you were grateful for what you received, but because you understood that gratitude is what you give, not what you perform. The company is yours. Use it wisely. Use it kindly. Use it to prove that redemption is always possible, even when we don't deserve it. Love, Grandpa. I sat there for a long time, holding that piece of paper, understanding finally what the whole elaborate test had really been about. Not gratitude, not inheritance, not even redemption. It had been about hope. My grandfather's desperate hope that someone in his family would be better than he was. That someone would take the broken thing he'd built and somehow make it whole. That his failures wouldn't be the end of the story, but the beginning of a better one. 3 months later, I stood before the annual shareholders meeting. The numbers weren't good. We'd lost money. Stock price was down. Several major shareholders were pushing for my removal. I looked out at the sea of skeptical faces and began. My grandfather used to say that the true measure of a company isn't what it accumulates, but what it inspires others to become. By that measure, Reed Construction failed for most of its history. We inspired greed. We inspired corner cutting. We inspired the belief that profit justified any compromise. This year, we've tried to inspire something different: integrity, transparency, the radical notion that construction workers deserve safe conditions and fair pay, that communities deserve honest dealings, that success means something only if it's achieved ethically. This has cost us, literally. We're down 23% year over year. Several of you have called for my resignation, and honestly, I understand. If I were you, looking purely at the numbers, I'd want me gone too. But here's what the numbers don't show. Worker injuries are down 70%. Employee satisfaction is up. We've completed 3 affordable housing projects that will house 200 families. We've trained 15 young people from underprivileged backgrounds in construction skills. We've acknowledged past violations and made restitution to 47 affected individuals and families. Is that worth 23% of our value? I think it is. But I also know that's not my decision to make alone, so I'm putting it to a vote. If you want a CEO who will prioritize profits over everything else, who will cut corners to boost quarterly earnings, who will perform gratitude without actually being grateful for the opportunity to serve communities, I'll resign today. But if you're willing to bet that a company built on integrity can compete with companies built on compromise, then give me 3 more years, and we'll see what redemption looks like. The vote was closer than I wanted. 52% in favor of keeping me, 48% wanting me gone. But it was enough. After the meeting, an elderly shareholder approached me. "I voted against you," he said bluntly. "I think you're naive and idealistic and probably going to run this company into the ground." "Then why are you telling me this?" "Because 40 years ago, James Chen was my brother-in-law. I watched Walter Reed destroy him. Watched my sister grieve for a man who was still alive, but had lost his purpose. And I swore I'd never invest in Reed Construction again. But my financial advisor kept putting it in my portfolio. I kept it out of spite. Wanted to watch it fail." "So why vote against removing me? Wouldn't that ensure failure faster?" He smiled slightly. "Because watching you try to fix what Walter broke is more satisfying than watching it collapse. Even if you fail, at least you're failing at something that matters." He walked away, and I stood there in the empty conference room, thinking about failure and redemption and the difference between trying and succeeding. 2 years later, Reed Construction turned a profit for the first time since I'd taken over. It wasn't a huge profit. We weren't going to make anyone rich, but we were stable. We were growing slowly, and we were doing it right. The James Chen Ethics Institute had trained over 500 construction professionals. The restitution fund had made payments to 93 individuals. We'd completed 12 affordable housing projects. We'd implemented industry-leading safety standards. We'd become the kind of company that Walter Reed had dreamed of creating, and James Chen had died believing was impossible. On the anniversary of my grandfather's death, I visited his grave. Someone had left flowers. Maria, probably. I sat on the grass and pulled out the white envelope I'd been carrying in my pocket for 2 years. "I figured out your test," I said to the stone. "The checks were never about gratitude. They were about character. You wanted to see who we were when we thought no one was looking. When the only witness was our own conscience. Dad performed gratitude because he thought you were watching. Mom calculated the value before thanking you, but I thanked you before I knew the check was worthless. Not because I'm better than them, but because somewhere along the way, you taught me that gratitude isn't transactional. It's not a deposit that earns returns. It's just an acknowledgement that everything we have is temporary, that we don't deserve any of it, and that the only proper response to grace is grace." I pulled out my own gratitude journal. I'd been keeping one since the night of his funeral. 2 years, and I'm still learning what you were trying to teach. Gratitude isn't about saying thank you, it's about living thank you. It's about taking what you've been given and using it to give others what they need. The company's profitable again, but that's not the success I'm proud of. I'm proud that Carlos Martinez spoke at the Ethics Institute and said it helped him heal. I'm proud that we've housed 200 families who couldn't afford market rent. I'm proud that not a single worker has died on our site since I took over. Is that enough? Is that what you wanted? I don't know, but it's what I can give. And maybe that's what gratitude really is. Not giving what's expected or what's deserved, but giving what you can as well as you can, for as long as you can. The wind picked up, rustling the trees, and for a moment I could almost hear my grandfather's voice. "Thank you for not interrupting." I'd spent 2 years trying to understand that phrase. Thank you for not interrupting the test. Thank you for not demanding immediate answers. Thank you for waiting until the lesson was complete before declaring it wrong. But sitting there on the grass, I realized it meant something more. Thank you for not interrupting my redemption. Thank you for letting me try to make it right, even though I'd failed so badly. Thank you for believing that people are more than their worst moments. Thank you for letting me hope that change was possible. I stood up, brushed grass off my pants, and walked back to my car. In the distance, I could see the Reed Construction Building. No longer just Walter's legacy, but James's too. No longer just a monument to one man's ambition, but a testament to what happens when you choose integrity over inheritance. The white envelope was still in my pocket. I'd thought about framing it, putting it up in my office as a reminder, but that felt wrong. It felt like performance, like displaying gratitude instead of living it. So instead, I took it home, put it in a drawer, and every year on the anniversary of receiving it, I take it out and read it again. Not as a trophy, but as a reminder. A reminder that the hardest tests are the ones we don't know we're taking. That gratitude isn't about what we receive, but about what we give. That inheritance isn't about what we're entitled to, but about what we choose to carry forward. And that sometimes, the greatest gift isn't money or property or success. It's the chance to become better than we were, to transform guilt into grace, to prove that redemption, however imperfect, however insufficient, is always worth attempting. My grandfather gave me a worthless check, and in exchange, I gave him something he'd spent 40 years searching for. Proof that the shortcuts don't have to be the end of the story, that it's never too late to choose differently, that the foundation, however rotten, can be dug up and rebuilt. That gratitude, real gratitude, isn't measured in dollars or displays. It's measured in the quiet choice to do better, to be better, to build something that will last not because it's profitable, but because it's true. And maybe, just maybe, that's worth more than any inheritance. The test is never over. Every day is a choice between performance and authenticity, between gratitude and entitlement, between inheriting the story or transforming it. I choose transformation. Even when it's hard, even when it costs everything, even when no one's watching, especially when no one's watching, because that's when character becomes legacy, when private choices become public impact, when a simple thank you, whispered to no one in particular, changes everything. Thank you, Grandpa, for the test, for the trust, for the chance to prove that your hope wasn't misplaced, for teaching me that justice doesn't always roar. Sometimes it's just a thank you, whispered when no one's listening,